Hi, I'm bored. 6 years ago, I had the sole goal of getting the golden play button. Golden play button is 1 million subscribers. We are very far away from that. The one I am closest to getting is the silver play button, which is for 100,000 subscribers. That one, we are also very far away from getting. So to buy the time and to give me some more peace with myself, 1 year late, I decided why not make my own wooden play button. So that's exactly what I set out to do. I went to my wood shop, grabbed the right piece of wood, and I got to work. Now, what I really wanted to do here was I wanted to have a sense of really nice grain. If you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or any freaking wood store for that matter, you will find a bunch of dark lines kind of running through the wood. That is called grain. I needed good grain for this. Luckily, I did have this nice piece of poplar hanging around the shop that I decided was the perfect width, and I just needed to trim it a little bit. So I got it cut to size. Now what? Using this Dremel that I got from the pawn shop for 25 bucks, I decided that I wanted to kind of recreate that 3D look that the YouTube play button has, where the logo is kind of indented into the play button itself. I wanted to achieve that same effect. You would normally do this with a wood router. I don't have one of those because I'm poor. So this $20 Dremel was gonna have to do. Luckily, it did have this cool little attachment thing that I could just screw onto it and basically use it as a router. So that was dope. But I did have one main problem here, and that was the fact that there's words on the YouTube play button, and I have the handwriting of a 5th grader. So I wanted to get some practice work done with the Dremel, considering I've literally never used this for any sort of writing before. So I got this random piece of scrap wood and I started going. That sucked. So accepting my defeat, I put the Dremel back in its case and I grabbed the original piece of project wood itself and I started sanding it down with 120 grit sandpaper. This got the majority of the imperfections off and I finished it off with some 220 later, even though this was counterintuitive because I was about to drill into it with the Dremel. But I think it was necessary because it did give me a nice and clean surface for me to work on. Since I got the poplar nice and sanded, I decided I wanted to put some guidelines down so I kind of would get a nice symmetrical feel to the YouTube play button. I pulled up a reference photo of something I drew up before of what I wanted to achieve, as well as an actual photo of the YouTube play button. I drew multiple guidelines at first for the YouTube logo just so I know exactly where I wanted the Dremel to dig into. I didn't want it to be too far to the left or too far to the right. I wanted to try to get it right in the center, which I actually think I succeeded fairly well at. I'm very happy about that. And for the corners of the logo, because the YouTube logo does kind of have these round corners on it, I just grabbed the nearby paint can and I kind of just traced along the edge. Next up was the guidelines for the text. Now this was a challenge because I have horrible handwriting, as I've already said. So I did put out some subtle guidelines just so I knew kind of where to write and kind of how to keep my lines straight. I wanted to space out my wording a little bit more than the original play button, so I ended up putting it into 4 segments. The first one was presented to, the second one was Natum G, third one was first surpassing, and the fourth one was 1,000 subscribers. Seems simple enough, right? Unfortunately, writing with a Dremel is nowhere near as easy as writing with a pencil. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, we got to take care of the YouTube logo. After a couple of failed attempts and some new guidelines, I ended up getting the YouTube logo quite in the center. I don't know if it's perfectly centered, but it looks pretty good, so I'm not complaining. Unfortunately, it was at this time that I noticed that the YouTube play button itself was just a little too long. It's not a big deal, so I took it over to my miter saw just to cut off an extra 2 inches, which is a lot, by the way. And after this was done, my mock-up was essentially done. I was ready to start dremeling. After coloring in the parts that I didn't want to keep anymore and I wanted to Dremel into, it was time for me to start dremeling. First, I grabbed this small engraving bit from Lowe's, put it in my Dremel, and I started to outline the edges of the YouTube logo because I wanted to make sure that when I went into it with a router, I didn't accidentally go out of bounds. I wanted to make sure the outer edges were clean. And I do think I succeeded with this. I ended up going around it first and then around the triangle in the center. And this helped tremendously when it came to routing and not messing up the design itself. Speaking of routering though, I did have my depth off on the router bit a little bit more, so it had really uneven edges when it was done. It took me about maybe 15 minutes. This footage is really sped up, but it took me about 15 minutes and I ended up getting the YouTube logo pretty taken care of. I did kind of have to shove my eye into that little socket there so I could see what I was doing. There's no light or anything, so that sucked. But in the end, I do think it turned out okay. It took me quite some time and my extension cable was not long enough. So I was kind of just in an awkward position the entire time. You can kind of see where I changed positions here. But after about 15 minutes of hard work, I did end up with a really jagged end result. So I took my orbital sander with a 120 grit piece of sandpaper and I went to work. I was careful where I put the sander. I didn't want to accidentally damage the inner triangle, but luckily I don't think I did. I did get to a point where I think I removed a lot of the really stubborn material, so I switched to just a regular sanding pad with my hand, and I did manage to even it out a lot more this way without risking damaging the rest of the material, because that would be bad. Don't do that. I finished this off with 220, and at this point, it was time for me to work on the words. And before we get into that, I just want to show you the words on the official YouTube play button. These are the words on the official YouTube play button. You can see them. They're very clean. Probably machine milled. Who am I kidding? They are absolutely machine milled. Just keep this in mind going forward. Because you got to remember, I had that practice sheet from earlier, which had such great results. So I was bound to get it right. Right? Oh my God, I suck so bad. It's like if you gave a 5-year-old a tattoo gun. It was genuinely horrible. I genuinely don't know how I could have done this better other than a steadier hand and way more Dremel practice. Other than a CNC machine mill, I don't think this was getting any better. If I used a bigger bit and wider spacing, I think that the words would have turned out better and more visible, because in the end result, you can't really see them as much. But it's a 1,000 subscriber play button, not the Mona Lisa. I'm not complaining. Who am I kidding? I'm totally complaining. So eventually I did get everything engraved, and while I was at it, I also took care of some stubborn edges on the YouTube logo itself. I did have some like missed areas there that I wanted to touch up on, but it was at this point that I was pretty much done with the project. I went over the whole thing again with 220 grit sandpaper just to give it that really nice to the touch feel, and it was time for the finish. Now it is Poplar, so it automatically does have this kind of green tint, which I know a lot of people don't like. It's kind of green, kind of yellow. It really depends on what board you get, but I decided for this finish not to stain it a dark color, which I could totally see why one would want to. I ended up using boiled linseed oil because this is just my favorite finish to use on Poplar. It gives it such a nice pop. So I applied the boiled linseed oil by hand with a rag. It sunk right in. I gave it about 24 hours to dry, and the end result, honestly, not that bad. Who am I kidding? That's probably horrible. Jesus Christ. There's so many imperfections. So many. It's so bad. You can't even read the words, but I love it. I love it so much. But I'm kind of happy with it. I'm kind of proud with it. And no one can tell me otherwise because I did it. This was done by me. Ladies and gentlemen, I was bored, so I made a YouTube frickin' play button for 1,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for 1,000 frickin' subscribers, man. For the second time. I'm sorry this is a year late. I'm sorry that everything has been a year late, but trust me, I am here, and I've never been able to say that with such certainty. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and if you're excited to see more content like this, which is much more variety, let me know in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe, do whatever you guys gotta do. Rise above, motherfuckers, and I'll see you all in the next video. Adios.